Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to this webinar on preparation for certification under ISO 27566. I'm just going to bear with it a couple of minutes just to let people join the session. So I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Let's wait a minute or two for people to join the session. It's sort of trickling in now as we speak. If during the session you've got any questions you want to ask, do feel free to put them up in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll try to keep an eye on the questions as we go. It's fairly short and sharp session, this, to one of 6 webinars on preparation for the new ISO 27566. I'll just give it another minute or so until I start to allow people to join. Now, the session is being recorded, so you can watch it on playback afterwards if you want to. But just give it a few minutes for people to join. Okay, I think I'll make a start. So welcome along. This is the second webinar in a series of 6 webinars on preparation for ISO 27566, which is the new international standard for age assurance systems. The purpose of these webinars is just to give a short and sharp briefing to anybody that's interested in the new standard and how to prepare for and go through the certification process. If during the course of the presentation you wish to ask any questions, then do please put them up in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. Let me just cancel that one. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions. If we're not able to answer any questions during the course of the webinar, then do feel free to drop either me an email or Obi an email, and we'll quite happily answer your questions. But this particular webinar is about preparation for certification. So we're going to look here at identifying the roles and in particular how the roles are clearly defined within the within 27566, because there are basically 3 roles that are possible to undertake during the for certification. There are 3 broadly distinct roles, but there are sometimes they can overlap. The first and the principal role is that of an age assurance service provider. This is the organization or entity that develops and delivers the age assurance result to the relying party. It doesn't necessarily do all of the process or all of the system, but it is the party responsible for that delivery of that result. Then you have intermediaries. Intermediaries can sit between the provider themselves and the relying party through things like orchestration services or combination services or successive validation services. Or they can sit between the age assurance provider and a source of data. So they could be like an aggregator of data, an agency, a reference agency. They could be a connection, a connecting tool or whatever. Or they can sit between the individual and the provider. So they could be providing a platform or a support service or information and materials in relation to the age assurance process. And then finally, you have the relying party. And the relying party is the ultimate decision maker. So when you are presented with a age-related eligibility requirement, obviously that requires a decision as to whether or not a person should be granted access on the basis of that age-related eligibility. The organization or entity that makes that decision is the relying party. So first thing to understand when you're scoping out your certification is which of those roles do you primarily undertake and which you might also undertake in a secondary way. So, for instance, you could be an age assurance provider primarily, but you could also provide one of your components as an intermediary for other age assurance providers, and that's not unusual to see that. So you need to understand the roles that you are potentially playing. Relying parties, generally speaking, relying parties only need to go through certification if either they've built the age assurance system or the age assurance process in-house and are not using a third party, or if they are using a third party and the relying party directly affects the configuration settings of the age assurance provider. So it directly has an impact on the performance of the system. So what you then need to do, having done that, is to scope out the what your system is. And the way that I generally describe this is by being able to state quite clearly what the individual components are that you use and have, and they can be one of three types of age assurance. Age verification is any component that goes and finds a date of birth wherever that date of birth is held, and from that date of birth, it can you can once you bind that date of birth, the individual, you can determine how old they are. Age estimation is where you are looking at features of humans that vary with age. Face changes, voice changes, whatever that may be. And age inference is any other fact or facts about individuals except their date of birth from which it's reasonable to draw an inference about their age. So, they have a credit card, or they have they're a licensed commercial airline pilot, or whatever it may well be, a senior citizen bus pass holder. These are all facts about individuals from which it might be reasonable to draw an inference. And what you need to understand are the boundaries of your role and your system. So the things that you take responsibility for. So that's effectively drawing on a page a technical architecture as a process map showing your inputs, so the things that your system is dependent on, so information coming in from elsewhere, your flows within your system, and then the outputs, the age assurance result, and how that is then communicated to the relying party. And being able to map those components and boundaries on your system gives you the control points and the access decisions and orchestration decisions that are needed to go through the certification process. What I would say is that sounds very complicated. It's really not as complicated as it sounds. If you are a age verification provider and you're relying on passports, driving licenses, and let's say access to mobile network data, you've got three components there: passport, driving license, access to mobile network data. You're dependent on the passport being available, the driving license being available, and the person having a mobile network connection. And then your output from your system is a age assurance result based on one of those three components. So just drawing them on a page of components. You can be as complex and you can be as overlapping as you need to be. We tend to recommend when people go through certification that at the very beginning, they try to keep their system simple. Because if you keep it simple, it makes it a smoother process through certification. And there's absolutely nothing to stop you bolting on different components, adding in new components, adding in new facilities to your process as you build and improve and develop it. You need to understand the desired levels of or indicators of effectiveness. This may well be related to your particular marketplace. It may well be related to a regulatory requirement, and it will be related to what your relying parties want to do. And so for each component and your system overall, you need to decide whether you want it to be a basic system, an effective system, or a highly effective system. And that will affect the percentage rates for things like the false accept rate, the false reject rate, and it may differ across different jurisdictions. So understanding where you want to operate and any local requirements there is important. For that, you'll need to understand your classification accuracy. That is, apologies, it just popped up then. That is effectively how likely it is that your system is going to be correct. And again, classification accuracy can be done at a component level, or it can be done at a whole system level, or both. You've got to understand how reliable it is, how it performs across different use cases. And then there's a lot of understanding of how you handle data securely, safely, privately, robustly. And then there are bits in the standard that deal with user acceptability, such as how intrusive it might be, how inclusive it might be, and how you provide a facility for handling complaints. And if you outsource any of that, then you'd need to demonstrate how that is managed and outsourced. Next thing is to understand where you get your data from. So your process map should show the internal, external processes that you use to be able to access data. So things like if you're using like a credit reference agency as a source, you should be identifying where that source is, and you should be understanding the certification and veracity and reliability of that source data. If you're working on external integrations, such as with digital wallets or with identity providers or with trust frameworks around the world or whatever you may well link to, you need to understand those. They're not necessarily part of the certification, but they could well reduce the overall amount of audit effort that's required, depending on what you're doing and how you are linking to them. And you need to decide whether you're supporting verification, estimation, inference, or all of the above, or some of the above, and whether you've got a process that you're using multiple successive validation. So, getting ready for your assessment. This is not intended to be a massive exercise in bureaucracy. This is product, process, and service certification. It is not management system certification. So there is no expectation that you have developed some huge management control system. You may well have that anyway, of course, if you've got information security management systems or quality management systems, but there's no expectation that you've got some huge control system. But there are some documentary requirements. So you've got, I'll come to the questions in the chat in a moment. You need to start with your practice statement. The practice statement is the most critical document that you have for ISO 27566. And it describes how you go about what you do, what your components do, how they work, and how they are privacy preserving and secure. And what we will do as part of the audit process, we've got a kind of like a staged audit process, but there's a pre-application or a pre-certification stage where we will go through with you and just make sure that you've got and understood the key components of your application. We can't write it for you. We can't offer consultancy services on it, but we'll go through and make sure you've got the basics covered. Then there is the stage one audit, and during the stage one audit, what the auditors will do is review the documentation and review the approach, review all the information that's been provided, and work out whether or not you've got a system that is fit for testing and analysis, and the stage two process, which is then when you get into the nitty gritty and depth of it. And then the final stage is what we call evaluation review. And that's where a second auditor or a review auditor will have a look at the work done by the team and make sure that it is all done according with the standards and the accreditation standard as well. So this first bit is about looking at your documentation. We will provide you with a list of expected documentation. And we'll be looking to make sure that it's refreshed, revised, accurate, and kept up to date as we go through the certification process. Just going to highlight a few common pitfalls. Obviously, the 27566 standard is relatively new, so we haven't got any common pitfalls yet with that, but just from our experience of auditing age assurance systems, some of the things that can cause some problems for applicants. So the first thing is having unclear boundaries, having confusion about where your responsibility and your system starts and ends. So which bits are you responsible for, and which bits do you use third parties for, and which bits do you subcontract? Which bits are outside of your control. Those are all really important things to understand. The second thing is misidentifying if you're a provider, an intermediary, or a relying party. It is possible to be more than one, and and we can talk to you about how that works. But it is also something which can create some confusion. Having incomplete data sources. So you may well be saying that you are able to do passports, but it turns out you're only able to do European passports. It may be that you're saying that you're able to access banking records, but you're only able to access banking records in Australia. Those are all things that you just need to be quite careful about assigning. And you need to be familiar with the regulations that are sector specific or regional to the areas that you want to operate in. If you are going for global certification, which is a option, you can you can pick whichever area of jurisdiction you want from an individual country through to global. If you're going for global, then you have to really have your head around quite a lot of different um, uh, uh, regulatory requirements in different countries around the world. Whereas if you're going for one country, if you want to go for certification against the ARCOM rules, for instance, in France, then you need to understand those rules and how that operates in France. All of this is within 27566's modular approach. There's a part of the process that you need to understand in relation to how you align your service with the regulatory risk profiles that apply in individual jurisdictions. Some have them, some don't. Some require particular tailored controls. So they may require that certain things have to happen in those jurisdictions. And so, if you look at particularly across the United States, you might find that there are particular types of age assurance method that are permitted and particular types that aren't. And you may find that there are requirements in relation to data processing, and there may be some things that are prohibited from access. So you might not be allowed to access certain ID documents, for instance, for the purpose of age assurance. So if you are going for a global certification, your system will need to be able to understand those regulatory risk profiles in different jurisdictions and apply them as a process within your system. You also have to be able to demonstrate how you monitor and review that and keep it up to date. Really great examples can be, for instance, being a member of a trade association that keeps all of those things up to date and keeps them all refreshed. That can be part of how you yourself keep yourselves up to date. And you also have to be able to demonstrate how you would meet the specific requirements. So, for instance, there are some rules that are imposed by ARCOM. There's a document that sets out what those rules are. There's rules that are imposed by Ofcom in the UK. And then within individual states in the US, this last week, actually, there's been some rules that have been published by the Office of the Attorney General for New York, which has got some specific requirements. I'm actually delivering this webinar today from Melbourne in Australia, and I've been working with the e-safety commissioner in Australia today, and she's got a set of rules that they've published this week, and I will be publishing more information about those in the coming days. So each of those you need to understand. What we do, though, is we try to strip out all of the commonality across all of those rules and do that in one part of the certification. And then we've only got to bolt on the various different aspects of it when we come to look at the scoping of the system. So thank you very much for listening. I am going to just switch my screen view so that I can see the Q&A. If you do have any Q&A, then do pop them up either in the Q&A or in the chat. But I'm just going to go to looking at a question from Antonin at Opal. So I'm just going to go, referring back to the slide on roles, would wallets and other types of credential holders be considered age assurance providers under this framework? Not directly or necessarily. It rather depends on their functionality. A credential holder is a potential source of a verified and usable credential and a potential repository for an age assurance result. But it isn't itself an age assurance system. So it's effectively it's a holder. So it holds records. So you could hold a driving license in it, an MDL, an MDoc. You could hold a bank record in it. You could hold a birth certificate record in it. And that could be a source record for an age assurance system. And then the age assurance system, once it delivers its result, could place its result back into that wallet for reuse and future use. But the wallet, strictly speaking, itself is not an age assurance system. But what you will probably start to see is wallet providers adding functionality to their wallets that enables the potentially age assurance processes to be built in to the wallet. And you may find that there are aspects of selected disclosure or other things that are in the MDoc standards that would slide them over into being an age assurance provider. So I would say that credentials and wallets are more likely to be intermediaries than providers, but it does rather depend on the specific functionality of the wallet. Just popping across the chat. What's your opinion on the free AV systems popping up as a result of tech documents shared across sites like GitHub? Sometimes it's the case you get what you pay for. If you've got an AV system that is well built, well functioning, operating properly, certified, continually reviewed, secure, built on security platforms, that's going to cost something. That costs money to produce, manage, maintain. If you're using a free piece of code, either on GitHub or go on ChatGPT and say, write me an age assurance system, that's all well and good, but it's not going to come with the safeguards. It's not going to come with the security threat vectors analysis. It's not going to come with data security and data protection in mind. So I think that kind of like says what limitations there are, and there might be. Just going back to the chat. On Q&A, I think I've got you've got AgeKey is in a way a credential holder, but not an integration layer. Can we certify them within the current framework? Anthony, yes, I think yes is the answer. So I'm broadly familiar with what AgeKey is. I think we probably just need to talk about whether it is itself a intermediary or an age assurance provider. We can have a conversation about that, but it would most certainly be within scope for certification under 27566. Perhaps that's worth a one-to-one conversation with either me or Obi on AgeKey. Obviously, you've seen that we've covered AgeKey as part of the Australian age assurance technology trial as well, and definitely an interesting option for providers in the marketplace. I think that is all I have in the Q&A at the moment. Let's just look at the chats. There's nothing new in chat either. Anyone got anything else they wish to add? Do feel free to stick them up there. And as I say, if you have any queries about any of this, then do feel free to reach out to either me or any of the other members of the team. And we'll do our very best to answer them and develop the conversations further. I think our next webinar number 3, which is coming up. I think the week after next. So we've got a bit of a gap now for next week. But I've got it in my diary as being on the 30th of September at 11 a.m. UK time. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And that one will be exploring in more depth the kind of things that are going to come up during the audit and the kind of questions you're going to get asked. Martin, if I understood correctly, you mentioned that ISO standard is modular to different requirements. Does it mean the applicant has to select a jurisdiction for getting certified? Would the certification only be linked to a certain jurisdiction then? The answer to that, Martin, is you can select. The options that we provide are you can select either an individual country, a trading bloc such as the European Union, or global. And if you want to go for multiple countries or individual countries, it's entirely modular. You don't have to go for global. Obviously, many companies may well want to go for global. If you are a global provider, then that you don't have to select individual countries. You just go for global. But obviously, if you are going for global, then you need to be able to demonstrate that you understand the differences across the globe that there may well be on the age assurance systems requirements. If you are, my recommendation is that if you are built for and designed for a particular country, and you're operating well within that country, you might find it worthwhile to go through your initial certification for that country, and then you can always add on other countries or go global at a later date. The way that the scheme is set up is entirely modular, so you can decide. There is a core bit that everybody has to do on 27566, but you can decide which components you want to include, which jurisdictions you want to include, which use cases in terms of online, offline, which sectors you want to include. And you can either have them all, or you can add to them, or you can take them away, or you can bring along new components, or you can expand to new markets. And when you do that, you don't have to go back through certification every time. When you add on a new module, you just add on that module, add on the test results for it, and then we pick that up during each surveillance audit. We do a view of what the latest modules are that you are operating to. So it's intended to be entirely flexible and account for multiple different ways of doing things. I think there might be a little bit more on that question. Nope. I think I've covered the Q&A. So like I say, thank you very much for joining. Next webinar is on the 30th of September. If in the meantime you have any questions, do feel free to give us a shout, and I'm quite happy to try to answer them. Other than that, I wish you the great rest of your day. Yeah, Martin, I'm just picking up your second question there. If you go global, do you need to implement the highest level of requirements, for international services? The requirements will depend on where you are going global. So it's not that you have to have the same set of requirements everywhere in the world. So it can be bespoke to what's needed in different jurisdictions. But yeah, ultimately, if you go global, it is a more complex process than picking one individual country. But we'd be quite happy to talk to you about that in some depth if you want to reach out to me or Obi or the team about that. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much. I shall end the broadcast now and hopefully speak to you all soon.